Radio Free 501c, the voice of Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm Cecilia Sapp. Don't forget to subscribe. You don't want to miss any of our future episodes. This week, I welcome first-time guest Elizabeth Engel, CAE, and Polly Karpowicz, CAE. And we're here to talk about a really exciting topic to us, consuming research responsibly. Get your nerd on with us this week. It's episode 197 and our countdown to episode 200. Everybody, it's Monday, May 22nd. And that means it's time for another episode of Radio Free 501c, brought to you by Rogue Tulips Consulting. I'm Cecilia Sapp. I'm the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips. I'm also a certified association executive and a certified nonprofit professional. This week, I'm so excited because I get to scratch my nerd itch. We are talking about research, and that is one of my favorite topics. I do a lot of research. I always have. I've been data-driven since childhood. I just didn't know that's what they called it. So I'm so excited to have two of my longtime friends and colleagues on the show for the very first time. Elizabeth Engel of Spark Consulting and Polly Karpowicz, who is an independent consultant, are here to talk about their white paper, Caveat Emptor, Becoming a Responsible Consumer of Research. Now, before we dig into the topic, I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to our global audience, and thanks to everybody around the world for joining us. I'm going to throw it over to Elizabeth first to say hello to our audience and tell us a little about yourself.
Thanks, Cecilia. So yes, as Cecilia mentioned, my name is Elizabeth Engel, and I'm the Chief Strategist of Spark Consulting, where I provide primarily membership strategy work for membership associations, mostly in the United States, but not entirely. And I've been in the association space for 26 years now, I think. Yeah, most of that time doing membership work and often other things as well, and running Spark since 2012. And let me think, something else that might be fun about me. For the last several years, I've been studying boxing.
Wow.
So in addition to running a consulting business and writing white papers, I'm also a fan of the sweet science.
Wonderful. That is great. I did not know that about you, Elizabeth, although I was kind of laughing when you said how many years you've been in the profession, because I'm thinking all three of us probably have to count on our fingers now. How many years has this been now?
It's a test of math skills is what it is.
Definitely is. So Polly, welcome to you. Welcome to the show. Would you like to say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself? And if you have a fun thing you'd like to share, like boxing, please do.
Well, thank you. I'm Polly Karpowicz, and Elizabeth made it easy for me because I believe we started in the association sector about the same time. Maybe I might be 6 months ahead, so I've certainly been 25 years. I am a CAE, and as Cecilia said, independent consultant. I have probably spent 3/4 of my years in the sector inside associations, in a professional association. In fact, that Elizabeth and I started at the same time with the American Political Science Association. I did a lot of different things there, which was really I am so fortunate to have had that opportunity because it allowed me to dip my toes in so many things in our association world, everything from research to education programs, diversity programs, you name it, except for finance. So about 10 years ago, I went back and got my MBA to cover that base from the University of Maryland. And now for the last year, I have been an independent consultant. Just prior to that, for about 5 years, I was director of the Center for Association and Nonprofit Research at Westat, which is a DC area, but international research firm, and had the great privilege of linking nonprofits and associations to the deep research expertise we had at Westat. So that's a little bit about me. Fun fact, well, currently in my mind, since we're in the late spring timeframe, is gardening. I spend a lot of time gardening and trying to transform our 200-year-old yard into a native habitat. So pulling out the non-native things and bringing back native plants for all of the critters that live here in our area.
Wow, that's great. That's something else we have in common, Polly, is I love to garden. I think, Elizabeth, you love to garden too, don't you? Because I recall you like.
Yeah, and also at my very tiny yard here in DC is all focused on native plants that make pollinators happy.
Yes.
Love it. Yeah. And I am trying to move. I live in a little Cape Cod in Silver Spring in an old neighborhood. My house is not as old as Polly's, but it was built in the late 1940s. I have 7 garden beds. So, and that actually does sound like we've gotten off track, but we really haven't, because we're all passionate about what we do, whether it's boxing or gardening or our continuing education. And all of those areas relate to the research that we do to do those things well. So when we come back to the title of the paper, Caveat Emptor, if you're not up on your Latin, that means buyer beware. And I think that is a great thought to kick off with. So becoming a responsible consumer of research. Elizabeth, let's start with your viewpoint on this paper. So what was the idea that got you excited about writing a paper about research for nonprofit and specifically association management professionals?
It's a great question, Cecilia. So association executives in our day-to-day jobs are tasked with a lot of things that relate to research. We are either in a situation often where we have to locate research or source research that somebody else has already done that relates either to the running of the association or to the profession or industry the association serves. Or sometimes we're even put in a position where we need to sponsor or create original research. However, very few of us have formal training or formal backgrounds in research and research methodologies. And certainly, I mean, I have been to graduate school, but I took one statistics course and decided that I would do a language as my requirement to fulfill those requirements for my degree, rather than pursuing a quantitative kind of direction. And so we're in this situation where there's tons of research out there. There's tons of research that's being presented. We have a lot of responsibilities to create research, to base decisions on research. And unfortunately, not everything that's out there is very good quality. I'll put it that way. I had used a slightly spicier way of describing that when Cecilia and Polly and I were talking about doing this session. So, what I wanted to do is basically work with Polly, who's got a terrific background in this stuff as well, to provide a primer on concepts and terms that we need to be familiar with, even if we're not expert, because that's what we're trying to do here, but that we need to be familiar with in order to be responsible in our use of research, in making decisions in our day-to-day jobs to benefit our associations, the members we serve, the professions and industries we serve.
That is so true on so many levels. I say true, maybe I should say accurate, since we're talking about research, because as Indiana Jones said, if you want truth, the philosophy class is down the hall. But I also am very passionate about making sure, have I checked things? Do I understand what I'm doing? And when it comes to research, I do a lot of research and I learned it on the job like both of you did. And I love qualitative research the best because it's my favorite, because you really have to dig in and talk with people and then find the different themes. But you're absolutely right. You really do need to understand what the heck you're doing, because, when I first started doing research, I had a bad case of analysis paralysis, because I was looking outside, I didn't even know where to start. So your paper is fantastic. I've read it. It's explained very clearly. It is something you could probably teach a course on with this white paper. I highly recommend this paper if the audience has not read it yet. And Elizabeth will tell you later on in this episode how to get the paper that she and Polly worked so hard on. But I kind of look at this, and this is what I was thinking before we throw it over to Polly to get her input. You don't have to know how the car is built to know how to buy one. And that was the analogy that kept coming to my mind as I was preparing for this episode, reading the paper. I can figure out what questions I should ask, even though I don't know how to build the engine. I can ask, what is the engine? What about the engine is unique? How do I know, is this the kind of engine I want? And so it all starts with questions. So Polly, when Elizabeth reached out to you and said, hey, you want to work on this paper with me, what intrigued you about this topic?
Um, gosh, one, it was such perfect timing because I was leaving Lestat and I was looking at what I wanted to do next. And I think over the last 5 years, as I've been thinking about, I guess I'm sort of like to think I'm in the middle of my career, not the last quarter, but what do I want to, what do I want to do with uh, the work that I'm doing? And I, over the years, have just continued to see that we really need more resources around helping association executives and professionals understand research better and support it within their association, understand how to discern good research from not so good research, and in the insight they may be using, whether it might be from inside their association or they're finding elsewhere. And that just kept coming back to me. So it's sort of like the planets aligned when Elizabeth asked me to do that. It was and Elizabeth will talk later about the fact that this paper is part of a series of papers that she does that are very much oriented around this idea of what do we all need to learn, and providing that information to the field. So I was so excited to do this. And your analogy about the car is so accurate. And it was exactly where I was when I, probably one of my first jobs at an association many years ago was managing several research programs. And my instinct was, being the daughter of an engineer, I need to know how the car works. I really do. And in fact, I did have people around me who were research experts who could help me understand what I needed to know to do that role. And thankfully, they stepped up and did that. So I, was thinking about myself many years ago as a young professional in this position of being involved in research and really not knowing, because I, like Elizabeth, I was a political science undergrad, and I definitely chose philosophy of the 60s over the statistics class I could have taken. So, I knew to a certain degree, but I also was, the fear factor comes in for a lot of people when we start talking about research. So was thinking about that audience of people who are not experts, but are involved. And now more than ever, we have access to tons of internal data that we have internally that we could be using. And there are concerns about how you handle that appropriately, as well as so much research that's out there that we can access now more than before. So it was just such an exciting thing for me to work with Elizabeth on putting this together, and trying not to write a textbook, but I'm really thinking about pulling in the resources that we have in our field. Some of the books behind me, we've cited in the bibliography from our association publications that are out there, and looking at, well, what else could we provide that would be helpful? So, that's really what motivated me to work on this. It was such a delight to work with Elizabeth and to be able to talk about this. And my hope is that we continue to have more conversations about research and kind of different pieces of it. Ethical research practices is really something that is near and dear to my heart, because I think there's some very important things we should know and keep track of in terms of research ethics. And also there's some mythology out there. You were just talking about qualitative research. When I joined Westat, it was such a tremendous learning experience, because I was able to work with the top statisticians and researchers in the world, and it was always interesting to me that my thought often going into a research project is we need some very formal research, when very often if you step back and you think about the questions that you need to answer, sometimes you may already have some of the data that can answer that question. Very often a mixed method approach, which we can talk about in a minute if we'd like, is best, where you pair qualitative and quantitative. And I don't want to speak for West, but it was just an interesting experience of even the experts are taking a moment to figure out, let's break this down and figure out what is the right fit. A survey is very often not the right choice. It really comes down to what is the best way to get to the answer that we're hoping to get here. And it's so many different things. And it's exciting that we have so many different options. But unfortunately, I think I hear from a lot of associations over the years that the first thought is an online survey, a mega massive survey. Let's ask everyone. When sometimes, starting with a phone interview with, a stratified group of people is the best place to begin. Not always, but it's just a little less. It might be easier than you think. So that's kind of where I come from.
Interesting fact. I also have a political science undergraduate degree, but I did not get out of the statistics course. Really something I think political science seems like it's very vague sometimes. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of research that goes into it, but there actually is. And we've talked a lot about the mixed methods. And I think, Elizabeth, bringing it back, to hear your perspective on that, I think mixed method is usually the best outcomes when you're looking for a lot of information about what are the members doing, what do they want, what are they looking for in the future. So what is your thought on that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. In fact, that's kind of the secret sauce of research, is that, they're the main differentiators in your methods are quantitative versus qualitative. So that's, surveys and other things like that are quantitative. Qualitative is conversational research. And then you've got your primary research and your secondary research. Primary research is when you are actually intentionally doing and designing and conducting a study. Secondary research is when you're going out there and looking at what already exists, often known as kind of like a literature review. The secret sauce is the best way to answer questions, because really, like when you're doing research, that's what you're doing, right? You have a question about something, about the way the world works, about the way your association works, about the way the profession or industry you serve works. You're trying to get an answer, hopefully a good answer, a validated answer. And the best way to do that is if you can combine all of those things. Do both secondary and primary research, and do both quantitative and qualitative research. And the reason for that is all four of them have pros and cons. They all have weaknesses to them that by combining them, you can offset some of that.
Great. And that is an excellent point, because usually when I'm doing research, I start with secondary and see what's missing.
Yep, exactly.
And you go on to the primary. But
yes.
Sometimes, we mentioned like qualitative studies. Sometimes in the healthcare field specifically, people will write papers for the journals, I should say, and they call them qualitative studies. And when you go and read it, really what they've done is just reviewed all of the existing data. So it's really a secondary study, but they call it a qualitative study. Yep. Because it's already out there. Yep. But different professions use different terms too, which again is another reason your paper is so helpful, because it clearly defines what these different things are. Now, one of the things that we do want to do is make sure that we're all educated, whether we actually do research like the three of us do, or we're on staff hiring somebody to do research for us, or maybe we're on staff doing the research because maybe we're doing a small research study of what's already existing. I think one of the things that research, as we're talking about research the process, and I'd love to hear either one of you jump in on this after I make my statement. To me, there's a lot of commonality between research and database management. And that's because with databases, what do we love to say? Crap in, crap out. It's the same thing with research. If you get crappy research or outdated research, it's just not going to give you a good outcome. So who'd like to jump in on that?
I have a quick comment. Elizabeth,
yeah.
Feel free to jump in. One thing that we talked about when we were writing this paper is we wanted to make sure that we were emphasizing that associations should think about their research as a program, even if they have only one research project. And it helps sort of ground our thinking in at the very beginning, not rushing to get, a data collection started. It really is critical to take your time and figure out what questions you may want to answer, and that goes back, goes all the way back to your mission. it can be complicated when you might have an association and a foundation that's doing research at the same time. And so there's an opportunity to coordinate. And speaking of coordination, if we think about our research as a program, we should also be coordinating internally across our organization to understand what insight do we need and what insight might we already have. So thinking about your research in that way, I think is really helpful, and it sort of prevents that rush to get started, and that's often where some problems can begin. We haven't really thought through what we're doing, and that can create problems in terms of poorly worded questions. We're not asking the right people to respond to our inquiries. It can create issues there. So really beginning from that standpoint of let's be strategic about this research and not try to rush ahead.
That's such an excellent point. Elizabeth.
And Cecilia, I think there's an even tighter tie between the idea of your database and garbage in, garbage out, and your research project garbage in, garbage out, which is your databases, not just your membership database, but all the different types of databases that you maintain are a really, really good source of information about what's going on. So what do I mean by that? We ask people questions, and we talk about this in a whole section about all the different types of bias that research can be subject to. People don't always tell you the truth. And it's not necessarily because of ill intent. Sometimes it's just they don't remember correctly, right? Like, if you're right. Sometimes it's, they're being sort of influenced by other factors, whatever. There's all kinds of reasons that people maybe aren't 100% accurate in the answers to your questions. And that's where the databases that you maintain come into this equation. You also want to look at, and this is passive data collection, right? You want to look at what people's behavior is. This is a reality check on, I asked you about XYZ. What do you think? What do you remember? What did you do? Whatever. But I also want to look at what did you actually do? And that can provide an enormous amount of insight, particularly as you look at the data in aggregate. You can start to see trends. Right. And that's, again, back to this whole thing of like mixing various types of ways of doing this and pulling data from different sources. And this is another piece of it is to look at what people actually do, not just what they say.
And there's really good, if you're using data that you have in your database, it's really helpful to know where that came from, for one, and just very specifically how dated it is. That's helpful too. So it's Elizabeth had mentioned bias, which can enter at any point. Whether it's respondent, you're asking a question that is you're asking too soon because they haven't reflected enough or it hasn't happened. All the way down to there's bias that can enter in later in the process in analysis, either intentional or not intentional. So it's really helpful to have, going back to sort of the set a plan, is that you have plans in place in terms of how you're going to sort of check those biases. For instance, a really good practice is test your questions. If you have a set of questions and you want to ensure that the question is clear and the response options are complete, that's where a little bit of qualitative work can help, where you can just sort of test those questions, go beyond the committee that you might have reviewed this question, or staffing might have reviewed this question many times. You can kind of get a pulse check on, is this question going to get us the kind of insight that we need back? That's just a small example. We have several in the paper, but it's sort of trying to look at ways that you can ensure that you will capture accurate and reliable information related to your research question. And that's what our members want. I mean, really kind of going back to your question originally, like why is this important? Our members really sort of one of their expected roles that associations need to play is as a trusted source of information, and also providing insight on key trends in their field or profession. That's something I had the privilege of working with ASAE on a couple of years ago, in their Impact Everyday study, and it was sort of not over 90% of the respondents from 25 associations across industries. That was number one. My association needs to be a trusted source of information and needs to provide insight on the field. And to do that, we have to be producing accurate research and also relying on research that is going to be accurate as well. So having these skills to kind of to be a responsible consumer or producer of research is something we all need to do.
Well, and I think, building on that, use the term trusted advisor. And I think that's key for any nonprofit, no matter what type of nonprofit you are, whether you're a C3 or C6 or C4, you need to be trusted for the validity and the quality of your information, which is based on the quality of the research you do. One of the things that I have seen over the years is that nonprofit organizations do not do research consistently. They might do it every other year. They might do it every 3 to 5 years, depending when they're doing the strategic plan. They do it in a hurry. Like Polly, you really hit that on the head about, think it through, make sure you're asking good questions. Because if you're getting weird answers, you probably don't have a good question. We struggle with research when we don't write good questions and we don't have a clear idea of what is it we're trying to find out. Not what is the conclusion we're trying to reach, but what is it we're trying to learn. And I think that's another thing you really hit on your paper. Elizabeth, you in the paper have added, you and Polly have several case studies in the paper. So is there a case study in your paper that was really unique or startling?
All my children are my favorite. Yeah, there's some truth to that, right? They're all interesting and very different, and I was immediately thinking about, Cecilia, when you were mentioning this idea of this shouldn't be a one and done kind of thing with research. And that's why one of the things that we talk about is like a research study versus a research program, where a research program is something that is more over time. One of our case studies is very much about that. It's the Association of American Medical Colleges, and I'm not going to try to recount the whole thing, but although, one thing that you can do if you're interested is come here, me and Polly and Jennifer Blank from the American Association of Medical Colleges, the Association of American Medical Colleges, AAMC. Present on this at ASE's upcoming Marketing, Membership, and Communications Conference here in Washington, D.C.
Oh, that's right.
in June. Anyway, so one of the things that was interesting about the AAMC story is that it was about getting a better understanding of how a particular research study that was repeated on a regular basis was being used so that the study itself could be improved. And, to your point about don't just do it one and done, that's kind of one of the benefits that you can get from repeatedly doing research is you can continue to refine the study, get a better understanding of what it is that you are trying to answer question-wise, how people are using what you're coming up with, so that as you iterate through that study in different years, it becomes both higher quality and more useful to the association and to the end users of the research itself.
Wow. That is, you said that so well. Thank you for saying that, because it's something I have been trying to promote, like at every organization I worked at, with clients. You have to do it consistently. Data is a part of life. I'm old enough. I remember that old Dow Chemical commercial, without chemicals, life itself would be impossible. It's the same thing with data. You can't do anything without data. We just don't think about it. I actually, a few weeks ago, was having a conversation in a Zoom networking group about the fact that I weigh myself every day. And people say, oh, I would never want to do that. But because I've collected data consistently over a long period of time, it allows me to see the trends and explain why the weight goes up or goes down or doesn't budge, which we all know that happens to all of us from time to time. But that's kind of a funny example, but it's a true thing. And it's why I've always thought about that way. I've always thought that way, even though, like I said, I was a little kid. I didn't know it was called data. I was just like always collecting information and organizing it and using it to make better decisions. And then also to identify trends. So if your organization wants to have a strong research library platform, whatever you want to call it, Polly and Elizabeth's paper will help you figure that out. And they will be, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Elizabeth, because I did see that you and Polly were presenting with AAMC at the Marketing Membership Communication Conference for ASAE in June. And that is actually something I saw. I'm considering attending. I haven't decided yet, but maybe I will now, so I can hear you guys talk, because I think that would be fascinating, because we really do need to have these programs, as Polly so well said, as opposed to a project. And Polly, you also mentioned something, and Elizabeth, you look like you're raring to say something, but Polly mentioned something about making sure you go across departments to see what everybody's doing before you do your research, which is great at breaking down silos. So Elizabeth, thoughts?
Research tends to beget more research. One of the things that will often happen is you walk into the particular study that you're going to do with a particular set of questions that you'd like to get answered. And hopefully you do get some of them answered. But a lot of times what you learn generates even more questions. And back to our lovely case studies. Again, all of my children are my favorite. The Casualty Actuarial Society, that's exactly what happened with them. And their story is really interesting because they also put together a fairly large scale partnership of multiple organizations who all had interest in and concerns about the issue of DEI and barriers to entry in the actuarial profession. And so they put together this whole team of organizations that was going to work on this project together. And they learned a lot of really interesting stuff that, of course, immediately raised a whole bunch more questions. And, even at the time that we were speaking with Casualty Actuarial Society about this project, they were already thinking ahead to what's the next iteration of this research, because we now have a whole bunch more questions that we need to answer.
And that's my favorite part. I love that messy stuff where you come back with, oh, wow, we did not expect to hear that, because it's like that. It is the invitation for another avenue of exploration. And to make the point that there often isn't an endpoint. So, if you're doing research that is repeated, that's why we do it, because we want to make sure, are we still seeing the same thing happening, or are there differences? Or a project will lead to another project and another opportunity to work across the organization, or as in the Casualty Actuarial Society, to work across multiple organizations.
Yeah, it's really not dusty or boring. I know some people have that perception, but research is fascinating no matter what you're investigating. Whether you're looking for a new washing machine or a new car, or how can I better serve my members in the next 5 years in a changing economy and environment. Opinions are fine as long as you understand that's what you're dealing with, right? But many opinions at least, are driven by data based on something somebody read or researched, and they said, well, here's the opinion I have drawn from that research. So opinions are okay as long as they have something backing them up. So I have written a blog post called "The Moon is Purple." Just because you say it's purple doesn't mean it is. You have to have data to back that up. And what did you find as you were working on this paper? Let's start with Elizabeth. When it came to that, like backing an opinion with research, did you find anything useful for people to go forward with?
Yeah, Polly will probably mention this as well, but one of the interviews that we did was with a woman named Dr. Joyce Russell, and she was one of Polly's professors in her MBA program. And the focus of the interview, it's titled "Developing Discernment About Research," but the focus of the interview was about information literacy. The short version is, and there's actually additional information about this in an earlier white paper that I had done as well. We are not doing a great job with information literacy, and it stretches across generations, across professions. There's a lot of research that was done out of Stanford University looking at middle school students, high school students, college students. Do any of them do better? Like, in this sort of new media world that we're in, will somehow the young people be better at this because they were raised in this new media world? No, the answer is no, sadly, no. They looked at graduate students and university professors, and just wide ranging. Everybody really did poorly. It came down to information literacy. The only group that really did a good job with information literacy, and more specifically, Cecilia, to your point, whether or not something is true, understanding whether it was fact-based and could be confirmed, or whether it was opinion-based and could not be confirmed. Again, whether or not it's true or false, whether or not you agree or disagree with the conclusion, is this fact-based or opinion-based? The only people who got it right consistently, professional fact checkers. That's a bit alarming. But one of the things that Dr. Russell talked about was information literacy, what it is, why it's important. And we have some resources in the white paper if you feel like your own information literacy skills could use some brushing up, which Stanford University research says they almost definitely should and could. You can get a little help.
I understand what information literacy is, but I have not heard that term frequently. So I'm glad to be sharing that today. And so thank you for bringing that up. I can't believe that this conversation has been so deep. It's like hard to believe it's time to wrap up our episode already. But this has been such a great time. I feel like I'm with my people, being able to talk about research and feel comfortable in my nerdiness and to fly my nerd flag, because I just love that. So before we wrap up, though, and I always like to ask my guest for their thought that they would like the audience to take away today. And then, of course, how can they get in touch? Elizabeth, you write one major white paper like Caveat Emptor, becoming a responsible consumer of research, every year, and you partner with different people. What's your next paper going to be about, and who's your partner?
Thank you for that question, Cecilia. My next white paper, which I am working on writing right now with my co-author, Shelley Alcorn, who many of you may know, a very smart and insightful consultant who's based in California, also works in the association space. It is on association, resilience, and adaptation in a time of climate change. So the timing on this could not be better. And no, we did not know that ASAE was about to come out with this whole partnership around sustainability with the American Geophysical Union that they just announced like last week, I think, or the week before that. And there's going to be a big focus on it at the annual meeting this August and all that. We were not aware of any of that at the time. But yeah, the timing could not be better. We anticipate that the white paper will be out in August, hopefully right around the ASAE annual meeting. And we think it's going to be really terrific. So you should definitely check it out.
This is a fantastic topic. And next month, Joost Hasperhoven of the Board of Airline Industry for the Netherlands, he's their Secretary General, is going to be our guest. And he's talking about sustainability in the airline industry specifically. But I know that he will make a lot of connections to the world and in the wider space of the world, as we like to think about it. So that's great. I think that is a very timely topic. I have not seen Shelley for a number of years, but she is one of the most innovative thinkers in our profession. So I think it's very exciting that we have two innovative, intelligent people working on that paper. We have two intelligent people who worked on this paper on research. So it's been so great having you both here. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I've known you both for a number of years. And so it's just so fun having you both on the show. And I hope you will come back.
Absolutely. Oh, and I totally forgot. You asked me where people can get this. That might be useful information to have as well. Yeah.
Where can people get the paper?
If you're intrigued by what you've heard today, which hopefully you are, you can get it at my website. It's getmespark.com. So like Spark Consulting, getmespark.com/white papers.
And there's a whole list. Do you know
Yes,
about how many you have on the website right now?
There are 14 on the website right now, and the climate white paper will be number 15.
That is fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That is a wonderful body of work.
And it's all free, which is fantastic, which I love about that. She's not capturing your information. Just you can download it anonymously and read it and she's got great people. I'm not blowing my own horn. She really does her homework to find people who have expertise in the area that this is on, like Shelley and folks like her. So it's fantastic. I will go back and read a few again that I have downloaded. So.
Yes, and I 100% guarantee you will not end up on a mailing list you did not ask to be on.
That's great. And that is so refreshing, because I was stalked by a major CRM company for like 6 or 8 weeks, simply because I downloaded a no-fee paper they offered. And I was getting hammered. I call it harassment marketing, emails, text, phone calls. If I wanted to talk to you, I would pick up. No, I just wanted your paper, but I had to fill in all that information. So bless you, Spark Consulting, for not doing that to people, because I hate harassment marketing.
Yeah, me too, which is why I don't do that.
But let's as we unfortunately have to wrap up this delightful conversation. I've had so much fun, and I really do love this paper. I cannot recommend it highly enough. And again, Elizabeth and Polly, to the smartest people in our profession, they did a great job on this paper. So Polly, as we're getting ready to wrap up, because as I like to say, we need to go rogue for now, but what is the one thought you would like the audience to take away? And if they wanted to get in touch with you, Polly, what's the best way to do that?
I'll start with the latter, because that's how my memory works. You can reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, easy to find. I think I'm the only Polly Karpowicz on there. So, it's linkedin.com/in/POLLYKARPOWICZ. Reach out to me there. In terms of takeaways, I really would encourage everyone in the profession to make it their goal to understand the basics of research. Elizabeth had mentioned my former professor, who's now the dean of the business school at Villanova, and one of the key things that she wanted to make a point about in our interview is lean on your information literacy, which I recoined research literacy. Become research literate, meaning understand how to discern research and the markers of quality research. And we've listed what those things are. If someone is touting research, for instance, there ought to be some kind of report. You should be able to figure out who was involved in the research, who were they connecting with for the data collection. There should be something about the methods. Those are just a couple of examples. So be research literate. And then secondary is she wanted to make the point that she does research on the workforce and workforce skills that in particular students coming out of universities and business schools and entering the workforce need to have. And it is absolutely the case from her research that everyone needs to have essential research skills in the sense of being able to communicate about insight, be able to share, to be able to communicate that insight with other people so that you can, get data, understand it yourself, and describe it to other people. So it's a basic skill now. It is no longer the case that any one of us can say, it's not my job to understand the basics of research.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Polly. Elizabeth, final thought and how
So you can get in touch with me once again at my website, getmespark.com. So the question about all this is like, so what, right? Like, you guys wrote this white paper and that's all lovely and it's got all this information in it, but like, why does any of this matter? Well, we use research to make evidence-based decisions, and there's lots of questionable research out there. Good research does not necessarily guarantee that you're going to make good decisions, but it helps. And bad research, barring getting lucky and just happening to guess right, almost inevitably leads to bad decisions. So Polly and I want you to have the best possible chance of making good decisions about how to invest your association's limited resources to get the best ROI for your members. As Polly said earlier, Associations are viewed as trusted, unbiased sources of information,
Mhm.
and providing quality research products is critical to remaining worthy of that trust.
That's an excellent closing thought. Thank you, Elizabeth. And well said. So as I said, we have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next week with another exciting episode. So if you haven't subscribed already, please do, because you don't want to miss anything. If you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your organization bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com. We have a list of services on our services page that may intrigue you and hopefully will inspire a conversation. If you are interested in nonprofit management education for the CAE or to renew your CAE, or you're just a curious sort like myself, check out our education program, the 501c League. It's so big, it has its own website, the 501cleague.net. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And on behalf of Polly, Elizabeth, and myself, we'll see you next time.